still follow these guidelines and rules. So they're doing in the WTO a kind of review of cross-border trade agreements. Are they still in place? Have they to be renewed? These multilateral agreements, they monitor it, and in addition, it is quite complex to proceed this. It is a inter-country dispute settlement body. When Xi Jinping and Donald Trump crashed some years ago, they both called WTO and said, China is doing this. China said, no, the US are hurting the today's existing trade agreements. And then this dispute settlement body was asked to find a solution. It's at first a kind of orchestration of discussions and finding solutions. If this doesn't help, then WTO is authorized from their side to say we have to eliminate this trade war and this conflict, and that in the following way. Yeah. So in general, it is a quite mighty institution. Indonesia joined from the beginning, since the foundation of the World Trade Organization as member. In the past, so in the last 3 to 5 years, mainly coming from the attacks from Donald Trump, the former American president, he ignored more or less the World Trade Organization because he said, I'm American, I don't need this organization anymore. I'm doing the politics like I want to do it. But luckily, the new president, the successor of Donald Trump, Mr. Biden, continues in working together with the WTO, and this is good for us to know. The WTO has 3 pillars, contractual pillars. At first, the GATT. The GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, is still the main part of the WTO. Then we have a second pillar. This is the General Agreement on Trade Services, Trade on Services. It's more or less a framework. And when you go to the slides on the WTO looks on the so-called GATS, General Agreement on Trade and Services, you see some recommendations how to handle it. For instance, when you send out people into another country doing their services for your customers, how to handle the different social security regulations there. Once again, WTO is an important institution now for us, not in direct contact, once again, a provider of statistics, figures, and so on. The GATS regulates transport, finance, education, tourism, environmental services, telecommunication, and so on and so on. The second pillar of WTO. Again, back to my slides. Here we are. And the third one is TRIPS, trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights. Also a contract that WTO members has to sign. Copyrights and rights related to copyright for artists, for literary, you see it here, books, writings, musical compositions, but also, and things, other things, up to software solutions. Also protected are the rights of performers, like actors, singers, musicians, sound records, broadcast organizations. They can use these rights that are there under this contractual part of WTO members protected. More interesting for us is the protection on industrial properties, trademarks. So our brand, for instance, that we have protected as trademark, technical patents, licenses, industrial things, and furthermore. So there's an agreement amongst WTO members to follow these guidelines and rules, and this is good for us to know. Today, that was mentioned in the movie, 164 members, official members. The members are shown here as green ones. Europe, with the European Union, is in conferences of WTO twice represented, or duly represented, the EU and each country. Yeah, and then we have some yellow ones. These are observing countries. They ask for membership, but they aren't actually members so far. Once again, countries who accept the rules from WTO have to accept them all. You can't say, I take GATT, but not GATS, or the TRIPS. You have to take it all. These are binding rules, and they have to be signed on a national level too when you want to join the WTO. And this is more or less a guarantee for us when we do business with WTO members, that we have this regulation in place, and it is a kind of safety for us. These yellow ones, when they ask for membership, are getting a review. This is here Belarusia, it's Bosnia, Serbia, we have Algeria, Libya, Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Bhutan. They are not members. Keep this in mind. And then we have the red ones. They haven't asked for participation. Monaco is a mini state in Europe. It's unimportant that Monaco hasn't asked for membership. South Sudan, Eritrea, and understandable North Korea. I think North Korea will never ever be member of WTO as long as they doing their politics like they do it today. So now, with this prerequisite and background information, we come to another topic. When I was in Jakarta 3 years ago, I made a trip by foot to a harbor, to a port where old wood-made ships were there, very old ones. And for that, I have produced some small movies. Let's have a look on it. We want to enter new markets, and we want to find the right ways. These are new ways for us. And now we start with the first questions, where to go. Target market identification, and then later on analysis. This is something that we do tomorrow on a more detailed level. Today it is a start for us. Our starting point is right now we have a business. We have solutions, we have fantastic products, in addition some services, and we are successful. And now we say, we are successful in our home market, but now it's clear for us we have to expand on a global level. And then the question is, where to go. The world is huge. And we can use the first classification that is, I guess, familiar to you, a clustering in ABC. Industrialized nations or newly industrialized countries, nations, emerging markets, sometimes called, or we have the underdeveloped countries. And the bottom of a ranking is sometimes called high PC, heavily indebted poor countries or backward countries. There are a couple of wordings in place. This categorization is not a scientific separation. It's a little bit a general descriptions and clustering of countries and target markets. And it is a separation in these terms, more or less in use, the same way from IMF, World Bank, and WTO. And the classification and the zoning is mainly based on a figure, one figure or two numbers, the so-called gross domestic product or the gross national product. Tomorrow I explain what's the difference between GDP and GNP. These gross domestic product, this is the roughly spoken, the whole of that what an economy is producing during a period of time, a year, the products, the services, and so on a domestic level or on a national level. In total per country or per citizens. So this separation is in use from these institutions, and the first category is we have the industrialized nations. Technically and economically high developed, and when we face the society, there is a high level prosperity there. We have a developed infrastructure in these countries when we look at the traffic, the transportation systems, the telecommunications, so the IT, in addition to telecommunication. It is an industrialized production, highly efficient and market-oriented, sometimes specialized in separate branches and industries, in divisions of work, and very often you see there, besides a highly industrialized production, a so-called tertiary sector, the service industry. These are the countries. In general, North America, US with Canada, sometimes Mexico is on that list and named as industrialized country. We have Argentina and Chile in South America. Sometimes Brazil is called also industrialized, sometimes newly industrialized. We have in the majority of the European countries there, in addition with Turkey. In Asia, we have Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, and sometimes also it depends on the one who's looking on these countries. Sometimes also China and India. Very often they are still named as emerging countries. It depends. From my point of view, China is definitely no more an emerging country. It is a highly industrialized and very powerful, big nation. India, perhaps too. Definitely Australia and New Zealand belongs to that category. The next one is the new ones, the new industrialized nations, countries that have the characteristics of the category A, but not in all items and perspectives. The profile is the former agriculture industry is replaced by an industrialized economy, high growth rate of the economy, similar productivity per head, but most of the time a little bit lower salaries, and that's the reason that was explained in the movie too, that the development of the industries in these countries started. And you see here India and in China still as emerging countries shown, also here Indonesia and furthermore. And also Mexico now in this category B. It depends on which information source you use. Another effect or picture is that the development of the economy hasn't led so far to the development of the society in total. Salary levels or other things, and sometimes in these countries the national currency has a high fluctuation in comparison to the leading currencies, the key currency dollar or the Great British Pound. And the last category, the so-called underdeveloped countries, third world. Yeah, what's there the situation? If you face what happens there, what is the actual situation? Weak infrastructure, definitely weak infrastructure, destroyed, completely demolished, very often by wars, civil wars. Only agricultural productivity there with a low level of production, no or bad logistics and the logistics for consumer goods, for food, political instability in these countries. And when we say what is the bottom of the global ranking, we have now these countries there. Some from this area here, and that what was mentioned in the movie, the countries from the sub-Saharan. These are the poorest countries worldwide. Only in the sub-Saharan we have Nigeria, we have the Cote of Ivory, we have Ghana, or we have, for instance, South Africa, but many countries are extremely poor and from the political situation unstable. The people that are living there have a very low living standard, a high unemployment rate, poverty, hunger crisis, underfeeding. The expectation of the lifetime is very low. High mortality rate for babies, for young children, and so on and so on and so on and so on. So a lot of problems in these type of countries there. We can split up this ranking a little bit more. We can say we have the LDCs, the least developed countries, and we have the third world, underdeveloped. We have frontier markets. These are countries that sometimes oscillate between this level and that level. We have the newly industrialized nations, the emerging and the industrialized countries. And the question is, what are the most attractive countries, the poor ones or the rich ones for us, when we say we are on the way searching for new targets and target countries? You can't give this answer very easily, and it depends. Like very often in the life, it depends. It's clear this very underdeveloped countries, like in Africa, they have a big demand for food, for products to consume, medicine, plus. But is this then a target for us? Question mark. So the first look on the globe is the world is huge, where to go? At first, again, my wording, we have 164 WTO members, and it might be a good recommendation for us to do business only with WTO members, because then we have as company, as enterprise, this safety net from the WTO agreements. This is point number one. And then when we look on this long list of, in general, of countries where we could go,